Reports of committees, committee of the whole reports, FSP report, have two together. Somebody want to move those? Councillor Veith does, Councillor Bonagor does. All those in favor? That's all of us, thank you. Moving right along, flip the page. Presentations, first up is the Transportation Master Plan update. Welcome Chris and team.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, senior management. So as part of the engagement process for the Transportation Master Plan, we're pleased to provide you with a brief introduction to this report, to the project this afternoon. In 2011, the city completed its first ever Transportation Master Plan. The city landscape was moving towards a greater intensification through a nodes and corridors planning model, and so the transportation plan had to reflect that shift. So with greater emphasis on multimodal transportation options for Waterloo's growing community. So 8 years on, we're now into a new era of transportation technology challenges, including the new ION service launched just last Friday. So the timing couldn't be better to review and update our Transportation Master Plan. And so given this, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jean Chartier from Paradigm Transportation Solutions Limited, who is the project lead for the consultant team assisting the city with this project.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome, Jean.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present this afternoon. We're just going to give you a very brief overview of the Transportation Master Plan update process, just to give you an appreciation of the project. It's just underway, and it's going to take us sort of over the next year to get finished up, but thought it would be a good opportunity to introduce you to what's happening and the engagement that's going on currently within the community. So just a very brief study, just give you a high-level overview of the engagement process that's going to be happening with the study and talk about our next steps. So a Transportation Master Plan, for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with the city's document, is in general a strategic planning document that helps the municipality to define the policies, programs, and infrastructure investments that are required to meet the city's future transportation needs. So it's a further detailing of the city's official plan to provide some greater direction around transportation initiatives for the municipality and where the municipality envisions it's going to go from a transportation perspective over the next 20 to 25 years. Within a Transportation Master Plan, there's typically a vision for what the city or the municipality envisions its future from a transportation perspective is going to be. We do some form of assessment of the current system performance. We do some forecasting of what our future transportation needs are going to be. And then based on that technical and policy assessment, as well as input that we gain from stakeholders through the process, we will then set out a series of actions and policies to address the future walking, rolling, cycling, road, and transit needs for the City of Waterloo. Now, it's probably important as well to indicate what's not in a Transportation Master Plan typically. And usually because a Transportation Master Plan is a strategic planning document aimed at a longer-term focus, it really doesn't get into details of, say, minor projects or detailed operational issues like a request for a stop sign at a particular location, or items that don't necessarily affect the long-term direction of transportation within the City of Waterloo. So a few examples, just for sort of reference purposes, are road reconstruction, so it won't be identifying the next road reconstruction project, won't be getting into things, as I mentioned, like stop sign changes or speed limit changes on specific roadways. It may provide a policy or a directive for the municipality to carry forward into the future as to how it deals with stop sign requests or speed limits, as an example, but it won't look at specific locations within the city. And another example might be the location of new bus stops. It doesn't get into that level of detail, this type of project. Now, the study has set out sort of three overarching goals. As Chris mentioned, the study was initiated to update the city's current 2011 Transportation Master Plan that has done the city well in terms of advancing a number of the active transportation elements within your transportation system, And this study is now intended to take a look at all the success and the progress that has been made over the last almost 10 years, and now forecast it out to the year 2041 to align with other overarching planning policies. In particular, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So we're intending to ensure that the Transportation Master Plan aligns with these overarching planning policies of growth and development within the city and the broader region around it. And finally, we have some obligations around the municipal class environmental assessment process. For any future infrastructure projects that are identified within the plan, this planning study will address the early phases of that process to ensure that you can use this document as the basis for future, more detailed studies. Now, the terms of reference that the city staff has put together and that we're working with set out sort of 5 broad objectives for the purpose of the study. Firstly, the objective is to ensure that the transportation system is accessible for all ages and abilities, so you'll hear that quite a bit through the process of undertaking this exercise to ensure that you've made a lot of progress in the area, say, of active transportation. Well, now it's the opportunity to make sure it's accessible to a broader group of constituents through the process of updating the Transportation Master Plan. We also want to make sure that the new plan aligns and meets the goals and objectives of the city's recently reviewed, and I anticipate soon to be adopted, strategic plan, as well as the updated official plan. We also want to get at some of the other objectives that are laid out in the city's strategic plan, specifically around road safety, making sure that roads are safe for all different users. We do that through something called Complete Streets and Vision Zero principles. As we go through the process of doing the study, we'll determine how deep into detail those specific policies and principles are going to be set out in the city's city's Transportation Master Plan. We also want to make sure that we support the Regional Transportation Master Plan, which has been to Regional Council. The final document still to be published, but we have some of the guidance that has been set out in the Regional Transportation Master Plan, as well as the ION service that opened on Friday. And finally, we want to ensure that whatever we do from an infrastructure perspective aligns with the city's asset management plan. Thought I would touch briefly on how the Transportation Master Plan aligns and connects to other city plans. 3 in particular. First, the strategic plan, which was released in draft on May 27th. Know that you're going to be dealing with that very shortly in terms of adoption of the strategic plan. But it set out 6 overarching objectives or principles for the strategic plan. Obviously, safe and sustainable transportation was the one that's most clearly aligned with the Transportation Master Plan. But the other 5, if you look at the other 5 principles, they all have an element of transportation embedded within them, and it's important from a transportation perspective to be able to being able to achieve those other principles. The other key one is the city's official plan, and there's a specific policy in section 6.2 of the city's official plan that says that you'll have a transportation master plan that lays out pedestrian and bicycle movement requirements. So it's a specific policy within your official plan that we're complying with. And then finally, the region of Waterloo's Transportation Master Plan. And what we're looking to do through this exercise is, now that the region has more or less completed their Transportation Master Plan, that we take the key elements within the region's plan that are applicable at the municipal level and integrate them into your Transportation Master Plan. A couple of areas that are really important that we're going to be focusing on through the update of the Transportation Master Plan is what's referred to as the first mile and last mile dilemma. So now you have a wonderful light rail transit system that's going to connect the community together. You have to be able to get people to and from the LRT. So that's going to be an important objective of the Transportation Master Plan, is looking at those integral connections to the transportation services, as well as looking at active transportation crossings and infrastructure. I like to think in terms of looking at your existing Transportation Master Plan. You've achieved a lot in the last 10 years of developing a very good active transportation network, but now it's time to sort of take it to the next level. And I think that's where this plan is looking, is to be able to get over some of the more challenging aspects that were not necessarily easily achievable through the last transportation master plan. Things like crossings of major roadways, some of the missing links that were more difficult to implement. So that's going to be part of the focus, not the only focus, but it'll be something that we spend a little extra effort on in developing the transportation master plan. City staff, when preparing the terms of reference, established a work program that looked at 3 phases of activities. We're currently in phase 1, where we're assessing the state of the existing transportation system today and doing some forecasting as to what future transportation demands are going to look like in the city of Waterloo. We will then move into phase 2 later this year in terms of coming up with the strategies and the policies and the infrastructure improvements required to satisfy the vision that's established through phase 1, as well as the needs that are developed at that point. And then finally in phase 3 is going to be putting it all together in terms of the future transportation opportunities for the city, and that's really crafting the plan that will then come before council for its consideration early next year. Thought I would also, I know that council is usually very interested in how we're engaging the constituents within the city. And what we're really hoping to do through this process is have a meaningful two-way communication process. I was remiss at the beginning of my presentation of not indicating that our team also includes 2 other firms, Alta Planning and Design, who are knowledgeable in the area of active transportation, so they're helping us with that aspect, and Allura Consulting, who is a public engagement consultation firm, who's leading up the engagement component of the study to make sure that we don't miss anything. Us engineers sometimes have a tendency maybe not to be as sensitive about certain things, but what we want to do in this particular case is make sure that we have a engagement firm that specializes in public consultation, and make sure that we do educate and inform participants in the process of going through and updating the transportation master plan. We're seeking specific feedback on key issues and opportunities, guiding principles, the evaluation framework, and the recommended strategies that will be coming from the plan. Now here's a brief summary of the education or the engagement activities that are either underway or are planned as part of the study. So you'll see I've broken them out into sort of the 3 phases. We have a number of different media that we're going out to people, different tactics that we're using to engage a variety of different stakeholders, right from your Engage Waterloo consultation site, right through to doing public open houses. We've been doing a series of pop-up events the last couple of weeks to try to get people in their environment to give us their input. Meeting with advisory committees. Obviously, we're making presentation before council. We're meeting with the region. We're meeting with a whole broad variety of stakeholders on Wednesday this week, right from neighborhood community groups through to utility companies, through to transportation service providers. So there's a whole host of different engagement activities planned to help supplement the transportation master plan development process. Here's just an example of what's currently on the Engage Waterloo website. I won't go into any detail, but suffice to say, we're giving people the opportunity to add their voice to the conversation about transportation within Waterloo, giving them the opportunity to identify locations and specific matters that they want us to consider through the process. So finally, just a few comments about our next steps. We're relatively early in the process. We've been at it a couple of months now, but we're almost through our first phase of engagement with the community. We've had a series of pop-up events, so we have one more planned for this Friday. We've done a community, we've got a planned community stakeholder meeting, as I mentioned, for Wednesday this week. We're meeting with the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee on Thursday. We've already met with the Active Transportation Committee a couple of weeks ago, as well as the Region of Waterloo, and done a series of community pop-ups. So right now we're in the process of doing some of the technical analysis. We'll be preparing our first phase report, which will be before city staff in the very near future. And we've advanced it just to ensure that we can keep the project moving along. There were some phase 2 and 3 research tasks that we've also had the opportunity to advance. So we'll be able to present those as well. So with that, Your Worship, happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Gene and Chris, and thank you very much for this. Whoever did that, the symbols that we see there today, I know I was approached by a group about 2 years ago about the accessibility symbol that you have there, the wheelchair symbol, that, the province still uses the old symbol, but it's good of us to use the modern progressive symbol in this slide deck. It's good to see that.
Yeah, this was actually created by city staff, so I'm very happy to give them the compliment of being very proactive like that.
Okay, thanks, Janice and team, and Shelley, whoever. Questions from council? I will have some. Councillor Bonnegar, Councillor Bodley.
Through you, Chair, Mayor, is that what we say? Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank you for such a great survey that's online. I found it went very deep and gave a lot of opportunity for really in-depth feedback. So I'm going to be interested to see just what we hear from the community on that. But I'm curious, is there any way to say, I know there's still around about a week left where this survey is open. Can you tell us at the moment what kind of levels of response you're getting to that?
Through the chair, I believe we're about 150 right now, but I'll have to double check and I can get back to you, Councillor, in terms of the specific number. But it's sort of it goes every day, so it increases a little bit every day. But I believe we're at around that. I think we've made 150 or so actual in-person contacts so far, so I think we're doing okay from that perspective. But obviously, any opportunity that we can get to have people, provide their opinion, provide their thoughts early in the process, it's always much better.
Councillor Bodley, Councillor Henry.
Through Mayor Jaworski. I'm curious, given the fact that single occupancy vehicles are probably the largest contributor to climate change greenhouse gas emissions, I wonder if you would consider or have considered reaching out to the Sustainability Advisory Committee in addition to the other two to get some feedback from them on the master plan.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, they are part of our wider stakeholder consultation group.
Through Mayor Jaworski, so at the next meeting kind of thing, or will somebody be giving a presentation, or is it more behind the scenes discussion with them?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So this coming Wednesday, the larger stakeholder group, it's more of a workshop, so it's going to be a two-way interactive information sharing, so providing process, what the city is looking for, and also getting that feedback from such stakeholders to help build into exactly, to your point.
That's an excellent addition. If we look at Sustainable Waterloo Region, I think they said transportation is the #1 greenhouse gas issue that we have here. So I think the Transportation Master Plan should have some intersection with greenhouse gas and potential reductions. Councillor Henry.
Yeah, and that would be my wife's now former gig, the Climate Action Waterloo Region stuff, which is a joint program of both Sustainable Waterloo and REAP, Green Solutions, who are often left out of those things. And now I can speak to that since my wife no longer works there. But I know the plug. I get the sense that today isn't today that you're looking for, council workshop or input on these things, because I haven't heard you ask for that, and I've heard you ask for questions. Is that correct? So that'll be my question, and then we'll see how much more I have depending on the answer.
Through the chair, it wasn't intended today to be a session where we would take direct questioning about specific elements. It was intended to introduce you to the project today.
So my follow-up to that is, what's the point in the engagement process where that is scheduled? Because I want to make sure none of us lose sight of those opportunities.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So there are obviously as individual councillors, the Engage platform is obviously open to everybody. And I guess a lot of that information coming through there would be through what you've heard from your constituents. We were advised there are limitations of what we can do in group settings. There's certain processes we have to fulfill to engage yourselves. So we can maybe go back to the clerk's department to get some feedback on how we can engage you.
We could do it in here. nothing stopping us from doing it here. So maybe just picking a time, whether it be August, September, or whatever, within your timeline. I think that would be good, because I think this group would have a lot of keen input that we want to give. And maybe if you had a frame of reference, a snapshot of what you have so far, that'd be a great time.
Yeah, and so I'll save this stuff for when we have that meeting and simply ask the coordination with the region's TMP question. I mean, notwithstanding what I'm hearing through you, that the region is very close to having an RTMP. My understanding was the last regional council was not the happiest with what had come before, and I don't know that the new regional council has engaged yet. So that's the chair, and then I'll ask you to follow up.
The issue is more around new technologies, embracing new technologies. Council is very keen on embracing new technologies, and it wasn't as reflected in the draft plan.
I'm almost disappointed it wasn't more of the plan. So I guess the coordination question I have with the region is what level of detail does this do staff in developing this plan deal with in terms of those? Because when we talk about closing gaps and identifying last miles and our role in closing active transportation, making those connections work. A lot of the biggest barriers to achieving some of those are on the biggest roads that carry the most traffic at the highest speeds, all but one of which we don't own. So I'm curious as to what that coordination looks like and how through this process we may be able to have some influence on the owner of those roads to make sure we have some good alignment on any of the tools we have, so that people across the city of Waterloo get an experience that makes sense to them and doesn't feel disconnected and uncoordinated.
Through the chair, that's an excellent question, Councillor, from the perspective of, it is very much a challenge in terms of sharing the integration between the various modes. To date, what we have been doing is we've initiated dialogue with regional staff. So at least we have a dialogue in terms of learning more about what they're doing, advising them of what we're doing. We're still early in the process from the perspective that I think we do have an opportunity to be able to bring specific concerns. I know that in speaking with city staff, I know that over the years they've brought a number of these concerns before regional staff to be able to address. So I anticipate that as we go through this exercise, we'll have more focused conversations with the region as we get specific issues identified, and if those those connections are really the most important and often controversial aspects of a plan of this nature. So I think there's a variety of different mechanisms, whether that be through first staff to staff or consultant to staff conversations about the issues, right through to the end of the process might be resolutions of council, depending on where we end up in terms of a common understanding on the various items. So I can say that within our work program, there's an element to deal with that. There's an element to deal with both regional connections as well as the crossing of Highway 85 as well as one of the issues that is within our scope of work to come up with some suggestions on how that's done.
My 2 cents, because I was going to ask this question too, but really my 2 cents would be we should take a fully inclusive look at our 25 square miles, and regardless of ownership. I'm thinking like even University of Waterloo streets, Cam and I had a discussion on that. Highway 85, you need to look at the overpass, the brand new overpass on Victoria Street that was built without a bike lane. And that's because it's built to provincial standards. Things like that at least we can point to something. When we're done this transportation master plan, we'll be able to point to something and say, you know what, if you continue on with that decision at your level of government that's inconsistent with our transportation master plan, here's why I need to change it. So in as far as we can do that type of work, Chris, I think that's, I think I'd be happy with that. It's our plan, it's our city, and some people own the other streets.
Thank you,
traffic lights.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. So there's 2 things. Something we learned with the first master plan was that having lines and things, like items on a map actually really helped with those discussions, because if you don't have something to point to, it's very easy for them to discount it. I hate to use the word battles, but we certainly won quite a few battles by having things identified on the map, which was important to the city's network. The other thing that's moved on since the work back in 2011 are the number of tools available to us now. Even just the number of cycling facilities, the type, etc., road crossings. We're seeing new PXOs, new pedestrian crossings, different. There's a whole number of tools that Ontario is starting to embrace that allows us to have those discussions when we're talking about individual streets and what the context of the right tool is. We never had those 10 years ago. So I'm more excited than and that we will certainly close a lot of those gaps. But some of those discussions, again, still will be challenging. Absolutely.
Councillor Bassett.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks so much for your presentation. I have just two questions. What's the reason for having the Public Information Center in Phase 3, but no Public Information Centers first in Phase 1 and 2?
Certainly, yes, through the chair. What we felt was, based on the experience that we've had in other communities, that we prefer to use these pop-up conversations where we, as opposed to the city convening a meeting at a location that's convenient for the time and date for the city, we go out to the community. And in phases 1 and 2, we can still, we feel it's better to engage people one-on-one, try to get more people involved, and the questions are not quite as specific from the perspective of saying, here's what the plan looks like, give us your feedback. It's more of a, sort of getting their input and getting a dialogue going. So that's why we chose to use the pop-ups in phases 1 and 2, because it's a much better way to get connected with more people. In phase 3, we chose the open house because at that point in time, we'll have a plan or we'll have something to present to people so that then they can react to it. So it tends to lend itself much better to that format.
Thank you. It's also helping me understand why there might be, at least what I hear from people, this disconnect. Because I think when people come to those open houses or public information centers, they're presented with the plan, and then I've heard this from people, they say, oh, the decision was made already, and they just wanted me to come here and tell them about it. And so I wonder if that's, I don't know what that is, an education piece, or just making sure at those open houses people are told what you've done before that, and it's very clear. I don't know.
Through the chair, that's absolutely correct, Councillor, in terms of, I don't know how many I've been to in my career where people think it's there's sort of being force-fed a decision, right? And I think, there are a lot of, as I showed on that slide with all of the different little dots and bars, we're trying to engage people in a variety of different ways, not just purely let's have public information centers because that's what's required under the municipal class of environmental assessment. Let's do a variety of different techniques. So we're using Engage Waterloo. We're having targeted stakeholder meetings. So we've reached out to all the community associations. We've reached out to the BIA. We've reached out to a variety of different specific stakeholders within the city to try to engage them because we know they have a particular interest. And we're using the pop-ups to get the more general public perspective of it. So it's a variety of different tools. It'll be active throughout the entire project, but we've just found that just having a couple open houses really isn't effective public engagement.
Definitely, thank you. You have tons of great engagement you've done, so it definitely wasn't a criticism of that. Lots of creative ways. And then in terms of, because I guess what happens after strategic, this is my first time being on council, so what happens after strat planning is it goes to business plan and then it goes to budget, our last budget. And so how does this transportation master plan, as it is right now, how will it fit into the business planning? How are you working with staff on that? Or can we, at this point of where it's at?
I'll start, and then I think Chris probably will finish on the specifics. Just in terms of how through the chair, just how it typically occurs in most municipalities is that you have a strategic plan, which then you have an official plan, and they kind of work together a little bit. The official plan is more specific to growth and development within the community, and it takes some direction from the strategic plan. But then a transportation master plan is sort of the next level of detail, is specifically to deal with the transportation elements. So within the plan, there'll be a variety of recommendations, and those recommendations may take the form of policies, programs, or infrastructure. And the infrastructure improvements are typically defined in some sort of capital plan. It is with those directives that come from the Transportation Master Plan in terms of the policies, programs, and infrastructure investments that then help to feed your business plans. And so, if it says that we're going to do, this is an example, higher degree of maintenance on our active transportation facilities, that would then have to roll its way into the business plans and then be operationalized through the budget. And so it is intended to serve as another guiding document to the evolution of the business plans. I don't know if Chris wants to.
I think Mr. Rapp has information as well.
Certainly. Through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Vassic. The other thing we do within the department itself is we take a look at all of our master plans. We take a look at road reconstructions, what underground's needed. We take a look at the regional capital program. We do all of that analysis to see what can be done together, the timing of it, and then what projects should be done independently and can be done independently. And then we take a look at the funding sources, all those things in balancing our budget. So that's how we take a look at all of what I'll call IPPW assets, linear assets. That's the process. So this would feed into that matrix, if you will.
Councillor Hanmer, please.
Just to follow on to that question, because I had a similar question around the timing. We've got the strat plan that's coming. We're heading into approving a 3-year budget, and yet the transportation master plan, if I'm understanding you correctly, we're getting it a year from now. So, and this may be more a question to staff than whatever recommendations are coming out of it, I guess we'll get into the second and the third year as we're looking at the operation plan for those particular years rather than the 3-year budget, or will you be taking a look at high level what it might be?
Sorry, through Mayor Jaworski. It would depend on the nature of the actual item identified as to whether it will be more of a high level versus taking a look at the more of the granular approach. So it's tough for me to predict, except it will be a combination, if you will. That much I can guarantee, if that answers your question.
Yeah, partially. It's more of a worry that we've got this, which could be a significant impact on things we might need to do, and it's going to be a year out of our approval of a 3-year plan.
Again, through Mayor Jaworski, and I apologize, but I don't limit my thinking to the 2 and 3 years. I go beyond when I've been looking at, as particularly the master plans. So I'm not concerned about that. It's the process, and as long as we maintain the process and continue to follow the objectives and link the objectives together with all the master plans, I'm not concerned with that in my experience, at least at the city.
Okay.
Phil, did you want to add to that?
Chris has got something, and
I'll.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Jaworski. So typically a plan like this, and we call them the 2011 master plan, we do things on a short, medium, long-term planning because obviously some of those critical infrastructures could be very large ticket items. Just for example, the highway crossing would be something that's out there. So as part of our work would be to try and strategize that to help with that budget. We've already started to identify some projects, not necessarily at the detailed level, but more like placeholders for the upcoming budget that allows us the flexibility of what actually comes out of the master plan.
Great, thank you. That's the piece that I was looking for. I would hate for us to be doing the process and not have any placeholders of things, because you'll be far enough into the process that you know what's likely to come. So I appreciate it's an ongoing kind of process, so thank you for that.
So through you, Mayor Jaworski, I just wanted to add that, that at a strategic level, the TMP is aligned with all these other documents, including the new strat plan, even though it was in draft form when we started working on it. So at a high level, there's good alignment, and as Chris mentioned, through the budget process, we still have some capacity in approved funding, or will have in the 2020 budget, to move some projects around if necessary, if something came to as a higher priority. So there's still that opportunity.
Then I have some questions to Chris, I think. Just on the transportation master plan, looking at different lenses that you might use. One thing would be the endpoints. So at the endpoints, you need to park your bike, park your car. Does the transportation master plan include endpoints as well, looking at that?
To you, Mayor Jaworski. Again, not getting into the weeds, but certainly at a policy level, we're actually already working on such plans that have come about through the work from the 2011 master plan, such as a bike parking strategy. So that's already a project that's actually starting to wrap up of identifying short, medium, long-term solutions for such things as bike parking, and that's just one example. So there's a lot of things already in play, but again, as Jean pointed out before, it's more policy setting. Working with our planning department on those type of policies, what's embedded in their process that already allows those things to happen, so that we can capture things in the right of way, they capture things on the private side. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's good.
And then on like a usability, and which would feed into like operations and maintenance. Is that part of this as well? As an example, if find pothole on the road, we're sure about to hear about it from drivers. Pothole on the bike lane, probably don't hear about it. So, like, is usability of the facilities a part of this as well?
Yes, it would definitely be an element of, in terms of us helping to establish a policy or a program. It'll definitely be a consideration, because that's often where, for example, active transportation initiatives fall down, is in the operational and maintenance side. I know the city is doing a good job in terms of trying to make that a higher priority. But that's definitely something that you hear in many municipalities about the challenges of getting people to use active transportation facilities, is that sort of the operation and maintenance side isn't considered. So my long-winded answer is yes, that we will be considering it.
Good, because I know our team's got great accolades from the cycling community on our trail maintenance over the winter. So I know it's important to the community. So I just want to see if that's taken into account here in some section or policy or whatever. So, okay, Councillor Veith, go ahead.
On that, through you, Chair, thanks for this. On that same vein, I often come across, I'll be coming out on a trail to a sidewalk that is beside a street that has a bike lane, and there's a huge curb. So I end up riding my bike on the sidewalk to get down. Anyway, is that kind of thing, is that included in this? That's another area not included in the TMP?
Yeah, no, good question, Councillor Veith, and through you, Mayor Jaworski, is a question that's come up a number of times, but it's something that we are, again, it's one of those in the background things that we actually are doing, more so when we become aware of them, as some infrastructure is built privately, and then sometimes we don't hear about that the little bit of a connection or the nuances, around that site itself. But it's something that we're working on, curb cuts, also from the AODA compliance with the plates, etc. We're trying to chip away at those at low-hanging fruit. One of our staff has just completed a walkability audit of all streets within a 10-minute walking distance from ion stations, to address that very thing. So each street is itemized of all what we call the low-hanging fruit, not big ticket item projects, but just low-hanging fruit of all those little things that could be done to improve walking and cycling, on a daily basis, so to speak. So that's the type of information we've gathered, and we can chip away at that over time.
Is it possible to see some of those results from our neighborhoods?
I will certainly have a look at the information for you.
I think that's it. This was just for good information for all of us, so thank you very much. Good to see the work continuing. Next up, staff reports. We have a 2019 first quarter health and safety report. Does council have any questions on that? Moved with a comment by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Please go ahead.
So I always appreciate seeing the support, appreciate that the numbers are trending in a direction that we prefer rather than a direction that we don't prefer. I just wanted to flag that given the conversations we've had through our strategic plan around, principles and visions around healthy and safe workplaces and all of that conversation, I would look forward to seeing something come out of HR or in business plans around how we can really drive this, continue to drive this number down in a significant way. I know that Mayor Jaworski and I sit on the hydro board. They deal with very difficult things in very difficult conditions on a regular basis, and it has been a very long time. It has been a long time since we've had a lost time accident. So I think there are things that we can strive for that are even better than what we're seeing in these reports.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor? Thank you. That's all of us. Next up, thank you very much for the report again, as always. City of Waterloo Strategic Plan 2019-2022. This is the report. Welcome, Anne Marie.
Members of Council. So I'm here this afternoon to present to you our 2019-2022 City of Waterloo Strategic Plan. So first up, I want to thank you for your leadership and your courage and your clear direction in making sure that we get this document right. So I invite you to continue your leadership as we begin to mobilize our community and our organization to meeting the direction that this strategic plan is pointing to. This plan it will be our common focus, and it will be our beacon. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite Trudy Parsons up, who will walk us through our strategic plan.
Thanks very much, Anna Marie. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council and staff. It's our pleasure to be here today. We've had the opportunity, as you know, to meet with you on a number of occasions, both from Council's perspective as well as staff's perspective over the life of the project. And today we find ourselves here presenting the near 99%, hopefully, completed strategic plan. Is there? Is there?
Just hit the down key on the keyboard.
Oh, perfect.
Click on the.
Oh.
First, you have to hit the escape.
So first, I need a lesson in technology.
We're all good.
Thanks for your patience. So we'll begin by presenting the vision, mission, and guiding principles. And as Council know, you've had significant opportunity to provide input into this. It's been very much appreciated. I think where we've landed is reflective of the input that's been received, and as Anna Marie indicated, both the leadership and the courage of Council to ensure that this truly is a reflection not just of Council and staff's vision, but of the community vision as well. So the vision statement is being presented as Waterloo is an equitable community that leads the world in learning, discovery, and caring. It's followed by the mission statement, which reflects the reason why the municipality as a corporation exists. The corporation of the City of Waterloo is committed to supporting sustainable growth, equity, and an inclusive, vibrant community through the delivery of service excellence. We are supported in this effort through a team of volunteers, staff, and elected officials that share a commitment to fiscal responsibility, healthy and safe workplace, effective engagement, and personal leadership. To support the implementation and continued decision-making of Council and staff, there's a series of guiding principles, some reflective of the previous strategy and as council will recognize, the addition and language changes in several others. So to walk through those guiding principles, beginning with equity and inclusion, each principle is followed by a statement and a clarity definition so that there is no interpretation that may not necessarily reflect where the guiding principle was intended to go. So for equity and inclusion, we work to ensure a sense of belonging, acceptance, and value for all in our community. The aim of equity is to ensure that everyone has access to equal opportunity and benefits. This principle recognizes that treating everyone equitably requires an acknowledgement of unique circumstances and taking steps to eliminate systemic barriers. An inclusive city is one that recognizes the values, differences, and diversity in planning, decision-making, and service delivery. Sustainability is our second guiding principle. All actions and decisions are evaluated through a lens of environmental, social, and economic sustainability. Sustainability refers to the concept of meeting present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainability considers environmental impact as well as impact on social and economic resources. Following is fiscal responsibility. We will act in accordance with good governance best practices to ensure effective management of our financial resources. Fiscal responsibility entails operating within a framework of policies and processes intended to improve fiscal outcomes and support longer-term financial health in an environment of transparency and objective measurement. Healthy and safe workplace. We are committed to providing a healthy and safe work environment for all employees of the municipality. A healthy and safe workplace begins with a commitment to offer an environment that promotes a sense of physical and psychological well-being, a sense of personal accomplishment that comes from a job well done, and recognition of contribution to the corporate vision. Effective engagement. Through diverse communication and outreach efforts, we will ensure that our community is informed of and has the opportunity to be engaged in conversations and decisions that shape our community. Effective engagement is the result of an ongoing commitment to dialogue, transparency, and the development of strong relationships that are grounded in trust and open communication. Effective engagement seeks to engage people who might not otherwise get involved. It is accessible to people of all abilities and backgrounds and helps to build a sense of ownership and contribution to the community. Personal leadership. Employees of the City of Waterloo are supported to demonstrate personal leadership in the performance of their role. Personal leadership is exemplified by agents of positive change who are passionate about growing themselves and those around them to achieve success. The City of Waterloo is committed to supporting its employees and volunteers to develop and demonstrate the qualities of leadership that enhance effectiveness, efficiency, and the delivery of service excellence. Service excellence. We are committed to providing exceptional service that meets the needs of citizens, stakeholders, and employees of the city. Through a commitment to service excellence, the City of Waterloo will create and reinforce an internal and external culture that is founded on responsiveness and is customer-centric. Embedded in this principle are service standards, performance measurements, and a commitment to continuous improvement. Moving to the strategic themes and priorities. these are being presented, as you can see, with a pillar that's been identified, the goal statement, again, which offers clarity of interpretation, and strategic objectives. So the first pillar identified, and again, these are not in any specific order, equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging. The goal is to strengthen Waterloo as a diverse and inclusive community. The definition or clarity in creating a city that supports a strong sense of belonging and access to opportunity for all, we recognize that our operations, programs, and approach to service delivery should consider circumstances and solutions to respond to systemic barriers. As you can see presented, there are 5 strategic objectives which are directed towards strategic approaches for the implementation of this particular pillar towards achieving our goal. The 5, as you see reflected here, implement strategies and tactics that strengthen the engagement of and all ages. Sorry, that should just say of all ages. And support an enhanced sense of belonging within the community. Incorporate best practices to maximize inclusion within all city business, operations, and service delivery. Address the needs of an aging population through responsive development, programming, and communication strategies. And you may recall following the last discussion that there were a couple of additions that were identified as being strategic and important. Focus on the economic disparity in our community by ensuring all work considers the impact, ensuring our work considers the impacts of this gap, and respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call for action for municipalities. The second pillar, sustainability and the environment, with the goal to transform Waterloo to be an environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable community. The clarity, the City of Waterloo is committed to environmental, economic, and social sustainability. It recognizes its leadership role in minimizing its environmental impact, prudently managing financial resources, considering current and future needs, and creating processes, systems, and relationships that promote social sustainability and actively contribute to a healthy and livable communities. The strategic objectives to achieve this is apply sustainability lens on all services and projects and enable bold local actions to address the climate change crises. Third, safe and sustainable transportation with a goal to improve all modes of transportation to make Waterloo more mobile, accessible, and connected. Safe, sustainable transportation exists when all users and all modes of transportation are able to share roadways and the trail system safely. When traffic speeds respect the safety of the community, when policy and planning supports the development and maintenance of sustainable infrastructure, and when more residents are able to rely on sustainable modes of transportation, such as public transit or active transportation, to get where they need to go. Strategic objectives to achieve this: adopt Vision Zero practices and tactics to enable safe travel by all modes of transportation, and to facilitate a modal shift, enable increased use of active transportation and public transit. The next pillar, healthy community and resilient neighborhoods, with a goal to position Waterloo as a strong and resilient community, investing in the capacity of people to work together to resolve challenges and maximize opportunities helps to build healthy, resilient neighborhoods that collectively form our community. The city is committed to continuously creating and improving physical and social environments and to enhancing resources to foster collaboration, community pride, healthy neighborhoods, and a strong community. 3 strategic objectives: increase the amount of affordable housing in the city, create and maintain safe, accessible, and vibrant public spaces that promote opportunities for diverse use, support the arts and culture community to enhance Waterloo's quality of place. The next pillar, infrastructure renewal, with a goal to focus on infrastructure needs through effective planning and engagement. Careful future-focused planning ensures that the city can respond to infrastructure needs today and into the future, ensuring that the city maintains existing infrastructure while planning for new growth and development. There's a series of 4 strategic objectives: optimize usage and efficiency of existing facilities and assets, dedicate appropriate resources to plan, renew, and maintain existing infrastructure, develop engagement strategies that effectively communicate and balance community priorities with operational and financial realities, and address the infrastructure deficit. Last and certainly not least, economic growth and development, with a goal to foster a robust and diversified economy. With the goal of economic growth and development is to create a diverse economy that works for all, where all can work. The city is committed to placing emphasis on fostering job growth that maximizes opportunities within the local labor market through the provision of employment that aligns supply and demand. And 3 strategic objectives: actively attract and nurture innovation among businesses to fuel a diverse economy, align economic development and job growth with community development objectives that address economic disparity, celebrate the connection with education partners to fully leverage growth opportunities. Mr. Mayor, perhaps I'll stop there before we talk to next steps, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? You want to continue on? Councillor Vasek has one. What a surprise. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. So I don't know what Anna Marie has been wonderful at going back and forth with me with like 8 million questions, and I appreciate all of the work. I love all this work, and so I'm sorry to be adding in a thought at this final hour. But it's because I've had some more conversations, I've read more documents, I'm new, so I'm just being exposed to all this stuff. And so the one new thing I've been exposed to is this idea that sustainability includes social, economic, as well as environmental and cultural. So the arts and culture piece can also fit within sustainability. And so I'm just wondering whether it fits in the strategic plan, curious about all your thoughts, in the sustainability piece, or whether it comes in the implementation phase, and it very well might, and that is a legitimate response moving forward. But I feel like if I didn't bring it up, I would feel really badly, because I read it as a document through the culture. The culture plan says that's what it should be, and that was full of consultation, and that's a document from quite a long time ago. And then I've had conversations that are saying that as well. So I would feel like I can't quite vote on it if I didn't bring it up as food for thought for all of us.
Can you ask which slide would you like to go back to? The sustainability slide?
The sustainability lens one. I think it's a second. So it would say, transform Waterloo to be an environmentally, economically, socially, and culturally sustainable community. I mean, it's food for thought for us, I guess, is really my question. And I realize it's the 9th hour, but I have also...
No, this is the right time.
Yeah, okay.
Tomorrow's not, so today is. Anne-Marie, do you want to give any thoughts on that?
So corporately, when we set out to define sustainability, because in general, sustainability is still quite a new concept for our organization. The term in general was coined in '94 through the Brundtland Commission and really focused on sustainable development. And so like any concept, it evolves and grows. The federal government does indeed have 4 pillars. When in 2016 I brought forward the definition of sustainability for the organization, the question was raised. I remember it was Jeff Henry who asked about a 4th pillar. And so, yes, there can be this 4th pillar as you've described. So to give some kind of shed light onto where we are and how we got there through the sustainability focus and the work that was done in 2016. We interviewed 100 staff in collaboration with UW. There was a group of students who met with staff to specifically identify how they saw sustainability. So through those interviews, we did get a pretty good understanding. And the pillar that they least related to or saw a connection with sustainability was the social pillar in general. So there was the least amount of traction and understanding about the what we'd call the triple bottom line. Perhaps that was where their least sense of understanding was, and so that I think is noteworthy. When we moved forward with the definition, the sense was that there was some traction within the organization for the triple bottom line, as well as some of the advisory committees specifically. So we looked to what we could leverage and where we could move from most skillfully, recognizing that sustainability was still a new concept in the organization. So that was really the launch pad. The report was brought to council in 2016 as part of 2016-008 out of community services. And that's how the definition came to be. I think at that time, we saw culture and anything else that term may capture as being a part of and embedded in the social pillar. And the description that I had offered in the past was, in a sense, it could be seen as saying vegetation and trees. Trees are intrinsically a part of vegetation. There could be value in specifically identifying culture, and if we did, it may be in the in the goal statement itself.
I think that's good. Can you just go to the slide that mentions culture in it for me?
Oh, there it is.
I just want to read that again. I don't think there's anything wrong with your suggestion. I think it's a decent suggestion for adding it back into that one spot. Any other comments from Councillor Bodley? Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So, I'm happy you brought up the triple bottom line concept, because that when I read it, that was kind of how I looked at it, was through a triple bottom line sort of approach. It's exactly the definition for triple bottom line, essentially. And I'm trying to, as much as I'm very much in favor of the arts and culture community, I'm just curious whether this is the appropriate place for us to be tackling it, or whether it makes more sense in the healthy community section. Because even if we go look down further into the sustainable development goals, there isn't really an SDG that super aligns that I can see with arts and culture. And there's a lot of other SDGs that reference other things that it sort of extend the definition of sustainability. So as much as I don't think, we're quibbling, I guess, over a word here that I don't think is necessarily I wouldn't be frustrated if it went in, and I wouldn't be disappointed if it didn't. I kind of think it belongs more in the others, in the healthy community section myself, because I'd personally see sustainability as focusing on these 3 pieces myself.
Yeah, through to Councillor Bonagor. It also depends on what definition you use of culture, like arts and culture. But if I think about culture of our indigenous people or our people who are Mennonite background, I might argue that they have a environmentally sustainable lifestyle and understand Mother Earth, and it might have a lens there. But Councillor Bonnegar.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I think that taps into part of the opacity of that term. So I would agree with Councillor Bodley. I think I'm more comfortable with culture being kept in healthy communities. My fear would be that adding culture into the sustainability piece, to me, I fear that we start to become top-down in how we're trying to, if we're trying to protect and make sure a culture is sustainable. I think we can do that by supporting a community and having their culture flourish. So I think by keeping that reference in the healthy community section as opposed to the sustainability pillar, I think that puts the city more in a supportive role. So if we support the community and we have a socially sustainable city, then ideally, and we have healthy communities, then culture can flourish. So it's not us dictating it, it's supporting something that needs to be nurtured. So that's where my reading comes in.
A few more thoughts, Councillor Hanmer, maybe Councillor Henry.
Thank you. On this one with sustainability, and then I have others, so I can wait till later if we
do the
comment on this one. I too like the idea of having the cultural pulled out somewhere. I do agree it fits with the healthy communities. And as I'm looking at the work that you've put before us, I'm wondering if calling cultural out specifically in the definition of the goal might be helpful, and where it seems to fit to me is in the second sentence. And then it brings it to more than just an objective. It says it's a cultural from a heritage standpoint that we might be looking at. So improving physical, cultural, and social environments would call it out for me.
Councillor Henry.
I think that's a reasonable place for the addition. Since I was named for having raised this a number of years ago through the culture plan, I thought I should provide context. At the time, I was a liaison to the Advisory Committee on Culture during the development of the culture plan. The chair of the Advisory Committee on Culture also had significant involvement at a provincial level in trying to entrench 4 pillars of culture in all things provincial and policy statements. And so certainly it got attention at the committee. And as we're building a culture plan, saying the word culture as many times as possible made a lot of sense. Having been further exposed to a lot of the sustainability literature through my research work and coursework in the planning department, I echo what Anna Marie had pointed to in terms of the origin of the term, the triple bottom line. There's a lot in the planning literature as well that focuses in that way. And cultural is seen as a critical part of a broader social set of lens. And so there is, I would say, not unanimity in the literature, but there is. If there is, it's in the other way, not here. That the wide body of it focuses on the 3 traditional pillars. And I'd echo, Councillor Bodley's, thoughts around concerns around putting it in, pulling it back up. For me, it would mean that would suggest we ought to pull things that are elsewhere forward into that to be able to make sure it means something. Because if we don't have anything underneath it, then that's a problem of alignment. And I like the plan as it is oriented and developed, and I wouldn't want to start pulling it apart to try to make the wording feel comfortable for me, like there was enough under it to be able to deal with the word. So I think Councillor Hanmer's suggestion in the second sentence up here fits and works, and should help make sure that it's up and well identified.
Any final thoughts, Councillor Vasic? Or yeah, please.
Well, I think this is the first time that I'm going to have to step back and be agree to disagree, which is okay. I still like all of you. But I will provide a bit more rationale just to, say my piece, I guess. And I think, okay, one more thing, yeah. So in terms of it being watered down, I feel pretty pretty good that it wouldn't be, because as an example, if you add a cultural element to, I mean, one great example would be Indigenous nations and people who live here. I think another example would be if we're applying a sustainability lens to a new development going in, for example, and we talk about culture, we might be prompted more likely to say, okay, what does the public art policy say about this? What might public art look like here? And you could draw on healthy and community resilient neighborhoods to have that conversation too, but it would just add a little bit of a different lens where we were embedding arts and culture into the building, which is such a big part of what we do. And I just went to FCM and I was in Quebec, and I mean, it's beautiful. The buildings are beautiful. Of course, it's an old community or an old city, right? So they have that as well. But there was something really stunning about the investment and heart that they put into the arts and culture. So I guess that's another important piece I was thinking about. And I think it is our role to dictate what matters to us. So not how it's done in terms of like, I don't mean to pick on you, sorry, I very much like you still too. But I do think it is our job to say the words that matter to us and to put them into the community. And so I think arts and culture is still good there. But maybe this is 2022 where we just put arts and culture right at the top, because it can do all these things. It can build healthy and sustainable communities, it promotes equity and inclusion, and it promotes economic strength. And so anyway, see you in 4 years, guys.
To staff, do you need to hear again what Councillor Hanmer had as the one line? Are you good with that?
Yes. So in order to make changes, what we will be asking for is a motion with the particular language and then a vote so that we can very clearly move forward with the changes.
Okay, so that's something that you can write down and be able to read out later? Okay, you start typing. Okay.
Thank you,
yeah.
And thank you.
Okay, and now, didn't you have a question still to go? Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. It was on a different topic, and it's my passion for volunteers. And I think we missed, you've included them in a couple spots, but I think we've missed in two. And specifically, the health and safety workplace. And it's all it is inserting the word volunteer where you've got employees and volunteers. And the second place is in personal leadership. So for that statement, I would suggest that we environment for all employees and volunteers of the municipality. And then again, in personal leadership, same thing.
Okay. Further questions before we move on? Councillor? We're going to go to the next steps after, but if you have comments on what you've heard so far. Okay. We're good? Okay, we're good. And that'll be something you'll want to see in the motion as well, the volunteers? Okay. Keep writing.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the discussion regarding next steps. At the end of Council's decision to adopt the strategy as presented with the changes, the strategy then really, the building of the strategy, the creation of the strategy is now a completed exercise, and we now move towards the implementation of the strategy itself. And it is at that point that, of course, staff plays a significantly important role through the development of their business planning as well as their identification of budget requirements targeted towards the specific actions or tactics that staff will identify in order to advance each of the strategic priorities that are outlined in the strategy document. The next step, of course, is also performance measures and ensuring that the appropriate performance measures have been identified as it relates back to the specific actions that will emerge through the business planning process. So staff will be engaging in both the business planning process as well as the identification of appropriate performance measures to present to council for consideration and approval. So on behalf of MDB Insight, on behalf of myself and Margot Begin, my colleague, who unfortunately was traveling and not able to join us today, to celebrate the presentation of the final strategic plan, I just want to offer my sincere thanks and congratulate you on what was a very comprehensive consultative process that I think has landed the City of Waterloo with a very strong strategy moving it forward over the next 3 years. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for helping our team on that. Now we do have questions. Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Bodley.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, thank you. I just had, so I'm drilling down a tiny little bit. So when I was looking at the dashboard monitoring, so there's one reference. It's on page 22 of the report, which is page 64 of the packet for people playing along at home. It's the active transportation segment. And I'm just curious about one of the metrics. One of the metrics being measured for active transportation looks at kilometres of infrastructure. I'm wondering if we can add something in here about connectivity of infrastructure as well, so that it's not just counting the kilometres, but we're also making sure it connects and is fully functional and usable. Is it possible to add something in like that?
Yeah, through you, Chair Jaworski. So these metrics are examples of metrics that are possible to support, looking at Goal 11 and embedding Goal 11. So they're definitely not an exhaustive list. Some of them are, examples of best practice. So part of these next steps as we begin to build our business plans and start to really mobilize around what metrics make sense to monitor, that idea is one that we can look at and see if activity are there standards that identify connectivity, and if so, then how can we utilize them? If they don't exist, can we create them and become a new best practice? So we can note that connectivity, and definitely in those next steps, we can start to look at that.
Excellent, thank you. And I see Mr. Hewitson behind you, so consider that my formal request.
I think that's a great one. I think Chris was here just a while ago, and they did the sidewalk gap analysis, and I think that's something that's key on all our radar screens, is to make sure that everything's usable in the best way possible. Councillor Bodley, please.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. So again, this is a favorite thing that I've done here. I really want to thank everybody for all the hard work that they've done. It was awesome. But I've had a little too rose-colored glasses look to this, because I just want to bring forward a discussion that we had at our Sustainability Advisory Committee and get that on the record. The Sustainability Committee was pretty frustrated by the lack of definitive metrics in the strategic plan, despite the discussions that we had around how the appropriate and where the appropriate location is for metrics to be embedded into the business plans. And I guess the frustration is perhaps derived from a bit of skepticism that it is actually going to get embedded into the business plan. So I want to take this opportunity to suggest that I don't share that skepticism, and I will be very vigilant as a councillor, as I suspect my colleagues here will as well too, to ensure that some of the sustainability metrics that are listed here in the document are embedded into the business plans. That's very important to me, and I don't want to see it fall through the cracks. And then just as a follow-up to that, the Sustainability Advisory Committee is creating a subcommittee, or has created a subcommittee, that is expressly focused on metrics that they would like to see the city adopt into their business practices. So I would very much encourage the appropriate commissioners and directors, when they're considering how their business plans align with the sustainability pillar, that they connect with SAC as they're creating these metrics and best practices for the municipality. So thank you.
Great, thank you. No, good suggestion. Are they metrics that they think we missed, or these new metrics, or the subcommittee's just getting started?
The subcommittee is just getting started. They've had initial sort of conversations about what they propose, and I'm not suggesting that we need to adopt all of them necessarily, but there's in particular conversations around our 80 by 50 goals in light of the new IIPC report and whether or not those are aggressive enough, or if we need interim goals. We can't wait to just get to 80 by 50. Do we need something in place, something by 2030, 2035, et cetera? So that's an example of something that they're considering, but there are other metrics that may well not be listed in our report as well.
Fair enough. Thank you. Seeing no further comments or questions, I think we probably need somebody to move the motion as is with the quote, with the following changes. So maybe since you already had the following changes, why don't you go ahead with your following changes, move the motion.
Okay, I think I've got them grouped, and Olga can help me. I've got them grouped into two. One is that the healthy community and resilient neighborhoods pillar goal definition be amended to state in the second sentence, and improving physical, cultural, and social environments. That's one. And then the second one is that within the personal leadership, service excellence, and health and safety workplace guiding principle, the definitions or the definition statement be amended to include volunteers. So wherever it says employees and volunteers. So there's three of them that it was missing.
Any chance I can get a seconder on this? Okay. I'll go with Councillor Bonnegar. I saw you with my left side first. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Awesome. Thank you, staff. Thank you, team. It's great to have a strategic plan. This is, I think somebody mentioned, this is once we do the first year budget, strategic plan, 3-year budget, we're pretty good. Hey, we can go home. Pretty good. So thank you very much for pulling this through for us. Although I think you mentioned they're not in any particular order, and then happened that equity is at the top. I think might not be a coincidence on that one. So good. Thank you. Losing track of where we are. Now that we've have a strategic plan on the future, let's demolish some buildings. We have Dominic here, proposed demolition of residential dwelling at 576 Conservation Drive, 211-5881 Ontario Limited. It happens to be on the fringe of Councillor Bodley's ward. Do you have any questions, Councillor Bodley? You do? Well, go ahead.
Well, it's not necessarily because it's in my ward. This is more, I guess I have sort of a practical question. So this has been, I'm curious about the steps of the process here. The building's been vacant since June 2018, and then they're having issues related to vandalism because it's been vacant since 2018. Is there anything that we have in our toolbox to prevent them from just allowing this place to go to a state where they have to come to council and request a demolition? I mean, looking at it in a bubble, certainly I agree that it makes sense to allow this. But if you had asked me in June 2018, should we let them take it and become vacant and go into a state of disrepair, I would have said, no, what else can we do? So I'm curious if there is anything in our toolbox that prevents this from happening to other buildings in the future.
Well, you're certainly right. It doesn't just apply to this building. Who wants to take that? Do you want Dominic?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Jaworski. To my knowledge right now, there's nothing in particular in terms of with the demolition control area bylaw that would help those cases that protect the buildings. Maybe Joel can elaborate a bit, but I know that we will be looking at updating the demolition control area bylaw because we do say that this is becoming a trend with applicants that are leaving the buildings vacant, and down the road naturally they become hotspots for vandalism or any sort of activities like that. So we will definitely be looking at putting in more restrictive measures to stop that in the future.
Over to Mr. Cotter.
Through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Bodley. The The city has tools within our toolkit to manage buildings that are vacant, so we can require that the buildings are secure through property standards. But we have no tools that require buildings to be occupied. So that becomes the challenge. In most of these cases, we're seeing developers purchasing properties, looking for development to proceed in the short to medium term. And because of tenant protection related issues, once the tenants leave, they don't want to reoccupy them because they may not be able to get the tenants out subsequently. So it creates this interim period of time when the buildings become unoccupied, and as a result of that, certain activities, i.e. vandalism, occurs. We can, through property standards, require the buildings to be secured and maintained, but we can't require them to be occupied.
Further?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So my next one, I appreciate that. Thank you. That's frustrating. My follow-up question is related to the property taxes. So the building, and that's related to this specific building. So the building as is generating a certain assessment value for us. And once it's demolished, are we concerned that it's going to, that this is just some roundabout way for them to skirt their property tax requirements?
Who wants to try that? Maybe Joel again? Okay.
Yep. Through your Mayor Jaworski, Councillor Bodley. Good question. One of the tests in the demolition control bylaw is to avoid the unnecessary loss of assessment. So it is one of the bases for which council originally established the demolition control bylaw. In these instances, what we typically see is a demolition and a 2-year time period to see reconstruction of a dwelling unit to replace it, resulting in a minimal issue of assessment. In this case, again, we weren't willing to allow the outright abandonment of the demolition policies. What we're recommending is an extension of the time frame. In this case, likely driven more by the extension of services up Beaver Creek Road to ultimately service this area. So recognizing just the realistics of when this area could come on stream, we've suggested an extended time frame. If reconstruction doesn't happen within that time frame, levies, penalties can be applied to, in part, recover some of the lost assessment.
And then my last sort of follow-up here, maybe, is, how do I put this judiciously, I guess? This is, as Mayor Jaworski says, on the outskirts of town. What is the major concern that we have with the fact that there's vandalism going on this property? This isn't a place where people are congregating or going, or why should we be worried about vandalism on private property on the outskirts of town where nobody can see it?
I think it's right on the side of the road, so I think people can see it.
It's well off the side of the road.
Oh, it's not the one that's right on the road?
It's well off the side of the road.
Questions for, anyone want to take that? Mr. Rapp.
Certainly through you, Mayor Jaworski, Councillor Bodley. The one concern we would have is life safety, that if someone were in there, anybody, and set it to fire, basically, that someone could be trapped. It's still, it's helping to avoid that type of scenario. To be honest, that's one of the concerns when some of these structures, particularly when they aren't within a neighborhood where there's eyes watching. That's
I was just going to say to Mr. Dykstra, didn't the house, like just on the adjacent property, burn down or had fireworks in it or something like that?
Yes, through the mayor to the councillor, yes. The life safety aspect on the outskirts can be a catalyst to concern for us as a city, and our response time, access, water service on homes that are just on the outskirts and can risk some loss of life. So that's a concern to us. And yes, we've experienced some of these situations in the past where the homes have gone up, and to get out there and address it, it creates a bit of a response needed by a number of fronts in life, both those who could be there and those who are responding or at risk as a result.
There's no good answer in all this. Well, there's a good answer, but there's no good decision in all this. Councillor Bonigar.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, this is not to do with this specific request, but more the broader conversation we're having. Given that, so as you said, this is becoming more common, like you're seeing some more instances of this happening, and the region and the city, we're facing a housing crunch. So I'm just curious, are there tools that we can use to incentivize keeping people in these houses, or rather to disincent the vacancy? Like, can we tax properties higher if they've been left vacant for X period of time, or is there anything we can do to try and help prevent this situation?
I tried that exact thing, same question at the region, because we're the one that level of government, that's where you set the property tax rate, but I didn't have a good answer. The answer was like essentially no, but maybe Ms. Patel has a better answer here for us.
Through your chair, Mayor, I can give you a quick answer from what I recall. The region has made changes to the tax policy, and the vacancy rebate is being phased out. So I believe in 2020, we will be phasing out the vacancy rebate. Typically, the rebate is a pretty significant portion of the property taxes. If I recall off the top of my head, it's somewhere around 75% or so, I think. But it is now being phased out. So that in itself will bring some disincentive, and the region is doing it across all the regions. So as area treasurers, we did meet, and we were all in agreement that this needed to be phased out.
The issue with the property tax rates or something, well, you can bring them down and rebalance, but you can't push any one level up. So anyway, maybe Councillor Henry knows an answer here.
No, but on this specific property, one of the questions Councillor Bodley had led to the question that I had on this one. Staff have noted that development is dependent in part on services being extended, and we would do that. They didn't say that it's also dependent on a whole complicated series of other pieces of infrastructure that engage a property owner that's currently at the tribunal on a planning matter that could take eons to resolve, or could be resolved tomorrow by settlement. But it's so there is a fine that we can levy after 5 years based on the proposal here if this doesn't go forward. But given that we are a party to things that could stop that from even being possible, does that impact the fine levy? Are we exposed to that as a problem? Or would somebody say, look, the reason I couldn't do it is because of you, pesky city, and so it's not a real tool?
That's through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Henry. You raise a good point that that would be up to a judge, perhaps, to whether we frustrated, I guess would be the term, if we frustrated their ability to satisfy the requirement. It is a good point. Coming back to the other question that was raised by Councillor Bonagor about incentives, what we might be able to look at more long-term, because it would take some work, is within a community improvement plan for the entire city that, again, we'd have to be quite restrictive so we weren't being taken advantage of, but where through a fund, affordable housing fund, that we could, through a budget process, create a fund where we could subsidize rent for structures if they were going through part of a development process to keep them habitable. That would be something we could look at in the long term. So that's one potential tool for the carrot, so to speak, to keep it habitable. Thank you.
And Mr. Dykstra.
Yeah, just to further on this conversation, just to inform council, within the Municipal Enforcement Service work plan for this year, there is a review of the vacant building file and just some of the items around that. So based on the conversation today from council, I'll ask for Mr. Turner to just advise on an update on where that's at and some conversations and bring forward to him some of the points that I've heard today as well.
So I'd say in response to Mr. Rapp's response to my query, I would wonder if there's a way to, through this motion, or that staff would already have the tool, prior to authorizing the demolition permit, if the property owner could indemnify us against those kinds of possibilities. So either something that we would say up here or something that you guys can just take care of.
Certainly, I think that the discussion's enough for IPPW staff to work with the solicitor to work on the conditions and the indemnification, whatever we think might be necessary. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bodley, what do you want to do with the house in your neighborhood? Tear it down. Oh, seconder? Councillor Veith. Oh, since she's your neighbor. She's your neighbor. All those in favor? It's all of us. Thank you. And do we need a motion to recess or just declare recess? Recess. Go out and play.